enjoy this conversation. The Human Experience is in session. My name is Xavier Katana. My guest for tonight is Karla Juvonen. Karla is an author and works as a physician's assistant. Karla has written her first book titled From the Brink of the Drink, which we're going to be covering this evening. In the book, Karla bears it all, from the toll that addiction can have on a person's life, and finally, her victory. Karla's mission is to help others, especially those who find themselves in situations such as the one she's lived and survived. Karla, it's truly a pleasure. Welcome to HXP.
Oh, thank you so much, Xavier, for having me. I'm so excited. It's just such a big problem, and there's just so much stigma and so much hiding within alcoholism, and I think some major misunderstanding regarding who can be an alcoholic, who looks like an alcoholic. And I assumed that most people who knew me would never in a million years think that I was an alcoholic. And I was right. So putting my story out there that, you know what, an educated, successful woman can indeed become a raging alcoholic and lose almost everything. But the most important thing is that you can get it all back and then some with entering into recovery. And it's just really remarkable. And I'm so happy to share my story. I share it all the time for this very reason, to try to inspire people to keep trying to kick it, because you can.
Yeah, I absolutely love that so much. And, you know, in the time that I've known you, you are one of the most tenacious people that I've encountered, and you're kind of like the little phoenix that could, the rise from the ashes. So, let's talk. This is your first book, and I love giving first-time authors a chance to tell their story, and we do cherry pick this. And what I thought when I was looking at this book was, wow, this woman has survived, every possible direction that you could kind of cringe and hang on and wonder what is going to happen next. That's what I was thinking when I read this book. So, being a first-time author, what made you want to write the book? Tell us a little bit about your writing process as well, please.
Sure. So I had never really contemplating writing a book. I thought it would probably be an undertaking that was far too challenging for what I was skilled with. I had not done a lot of writing other than the required writing in coursework in undergrad and graduate school. But I had told my story ad nauseum, really, at many different places. And someone, actually my first ex-husband, said, you really should write this because it really could help some people. And I just was like, oh, yeah, well, I don't know about that. That's haha. And I started thinking about it some more. And I figured, you know what, Karla, if you can figure out a way to start the book that would be interesting and a kind of a hook to be like, okay, this isn't just going to be your run-of-the-mill, this is what alcoholism is and this is what you need to do and you have to jump on this. But it's just more of a, okay, this is a story that I might be able to relate to. And so once I came up with the way to begin it, then it was just a matter of, I jotted down an outline, filled in the blanks, and it was written in 3 weeks. I just came pouring out, very cathartic. And actually, even if it had never gotten to anyone else, it was actually a great exercise for myself.
Yeah, it has to be that. It has to be a type of catharsis to write that all down and look back at it and, just self-actualize in a way this sort of journey that you've taken. And as it turns out, you've almost captured lightning in a bottle here, and your publisher is giving you, you're working on your second book now.
Yes, it's in editing already as we speak, actually. So.
Wow. Okay. So let's get into From the Brink of the Drink. We were talking about this a little bit in the pre-show. There's such a stigma to people who suffer from this disease, and where do you think that comes from? That stigma that society labels this as.
I think it starts simply from being ingrained that it's a choice, that that the first drink you take is a choice, and that is true. So I think it's just that um, people look at it as if, there's a problem, and eh, I don't know. It's a problem that was choice initiated, so it should be a problem that they can just fix.
Right.
Like, it seemed, I don't know, it's hard to put into words why the stigma is such, but I really think it comes down to the idea that it's a moral failing, that people drank, they couldn't stop drinking because they were somehow less than, they were a bad person, they were the grungy old guy under the bridge with the paper bag around his bottle. They got on Skid Row because of their own life choices, and so let's cast them away. We certainly don't want to catch what they have. We don't want them part of our society. We certainly wouldn't want them practicing medicine. And I think that it just becomes a situation where, because of that stigma, professionals, particularly medical professionals and pilots, really are reluctant to even seek treatment or help because it can be career ending.
Absolutely. And I mean, a lot of this, I think what you're hinting at is a lot of people are functional alcoholics, and, they're kind of taking a drink and living life, and, they're functioning, every day. So it's such a strange thing, and I think another reason that we connected was, of Dr. Gabor Mate's work, and he's been on the show, and a lot of this, stems from childhood, which kind of segues me into the book. You started this process of sort of running away from your problems and, using alcohol very early on in your childhood. How did that start for you? And, where did this process begin of using alcohol in a destructive way?
For me, it was destructive from the get-go. I remember my first taste of alcohol. I was a little girl and I had the chicken pox, and I had them everywhere, including in my mouth and throat. And my parents made me and my sister grasshoppers with creme de menthe, the whole thing. And it did help soothe my throat, but more importantly, I was able to sleep. And from the get-go in my life as an infant, as a toddler, and really through till today, sleep has been a real challenge for me. And so I noticed that really helped. Fast forward just a couple of years, and I had really been watching my parents. They drank, but they only drank socially here and there. They'd get friends, all the kids would be involved, we'd play games and have a good time, and I could totally see something change, something switch in the adults, where they got a little sillier, they laughed a little louder, everyone was less uptight, and I totally noticed that, because I wanted some of that. I wanted some of that peace, or that relaxed, or that decreased self-consciousness that I could see even from a very young age that was helpful for them. And so I kind of made a plan and thought, oh, I wonder if this will be helpful for me. And it certainly was. The first night that I decided this is what I'm going to try, I was 12 years old, and my parents had a liquor cabinet in my dad's office, and it was actually a closet, a small closet, but you could walk into it, turn on the light, shut the door, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I had had a particularly stressful day at school, trying to be perfect and getting straight A's and doing everything I was supposed to be doing. And that was my first high school year. And in my little town, 7th through 12th grade was high school. And high school was a hard transition. I think it is for almost everybody.
Sure.
But I was feeling pressure and stress, and so I snuck in there with a little tiny juice glass, and gin was what they had the most of, so I just poured 2 ounces into my little juice glass. Then I went to the kitchen and grabbed what I could find that was sweet, and it happened to be, ironically, ginger snaps. And I took my medicine, I guess, my gin and my ginger snaps down to my room and sipped and snacked until I fell blissfully asleep. And that was how it started.
The beginning of the end, so to speak.
Yes.
I mean,
a slow process, but for me, it isn't for everyone. Some have issues with blackout drinking and things, first time they use. That wasn't the trajectory for me.
Huh. It's amazing that this compound, this drug, is available on any street corner that you go to. You can go and find this substance, and so it's interesting. And with prohibition that happened, it's they've tried to regulate this, but it seems like people use this as a way to loosen up sometimes if they're feeling nervous, and they don't really recognize the harm that they're doing, the conditioning that they're setting, this substance sort of conditioning where they need a substance to function at some point. And when did you go from drinking? I mean, you started as a kid in high school, and that's when you took that first drink. But as you progressed into college, how did that work? You were doing your master's program, and were you drinking by yourself again, or how did it work?
Yeah, I always drank by myself because I found it to be safer. I didn't want the headaches of the party at the University of Minnesota with a bunch of people you didn't know and potentially drugs and trouble and cops, and I just know. So the risk of getting a mine or the risk of getting in trouble in one way or another, either with the police or with my parents or with the school, that was enough of a deterrent for me to decide this one I love, but this one I'm going to do for the most part by myself. And it was very, very functional for me for a long time. In college, I would get all my studies done. I carried 2 part-time jobs. I'd go do what I needed to do. But then at night, when it was finally time to go to sleep, I had my bottle of brandy right next to my bed, kind of tucked underneath it. And I would take a few pulls off of that, and that would do it. And I would get up the next morning, not hungover or anything, because I hadn't gotten drunk. I had just relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's an insidious pattern, because with alcohol, just like almost every substance, eventually you need more of it to get that same effect. And then it's also easy to kind of overshoot because I want to get that relaxed. I'm not feeling I'm getting it fast enough. And so I'll drink more than I did before. And then tomorrow night I might need even a few drops more. And over years and years, that just progresses in some people like me into a really serious problem.
Yeah, I definitely can understand that, but it's odd to me because it's kind of like a parallel of other people. I would think that they start drinking socially and then move to drinking alone when they're trying to cover up their problems or the way they feel about something. But it's funny to me that you had this thought. Well, I don't want to get in trouble with these other things, so I'll just kind of drink by myself.
Oh yeah, sneaky and sort of manipulative from the get-go. And it wasn't that I really didn't want to be social, but I just didn't want to get in trouble.
Huh. But I mean, it did lead to that. And so just moving forward in the timeline a bit, you got into a relationship, and I want to talk about this because I think when we are in these types of relationships that are mutually destructive, I think it can be hard to recognize that immediately. So tell us a little bit about, this relationship you were in and the marriage and how that worked, how that dynamic worked.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I met Jim in our graduate studies for physician assistant master's degrees in Iowa City. And my undergrad had been at a Christian college. They were all studying to be parochial school teachers or pastors or whomever. And I was the only one there that drank. I was the only one there that wasn't a virgin. I was the only one there that was less than in my own mind. And so that's another reason I kind of kept my drinking to myself during undergrad. And I wouldn't have chosen such a conservative school had I not been given a scholarship to go there. So that sort of made the decision an easy one. But it wasn't an easy 3 years of time. In fact, I say 3 years because I powered through it as fast as I could, because I really didn't care for it. It wasn't an environment that worked for me. I certainly couldn't be myself.
Hmm.
And so I was hiding for a number of reasons, but that was one of them. But when I got to the University of Iowa, that's a big 10, big school, Iowa City's college town, so much fun, restaurants and bars and nightlife and everything catering to the graduate students and older undergraduate students. And I was struggling with our first summer. We had a really, really tricky biochemistry course, and we were going through the Krebs cycle, and diabetes and glucose and insulin and how this all works. And it was really hard for me. But I met Jim, and Jim was also a Minnesota native. And at that point, there weren't very many PA programs in the country. So people were from all over the country. So he and I sort of met and became friends just simply because we were both Minnesotans. But then he had recently graduated from a biochemistry program. So this biochem class was a piece of cake for him. And he was also a fantastic teacher and loved to sit down and go through it and share and teach. And so that's how it began. He agreed to kind of tutor me. And we studied hard, and I got it, I passed it, that type of thing. But we also began to realize how much we had in common. We laughed a lot, we studied hard, and then we drank hard. And I could tell right away that Jim was just as heavy of a drinker as I was, if not even heavier.
Oh,
And that
no.
was so refreshing to me.
Hmm.
It should have been a turnoff, but instead it was refreshing because I felt like, oh, thank God I can drink how I want it out in the open with him.
It normalized it for you.
And yes, it normalized it because he was using just as much or more. And people with substance disorders tend to do that. That you'll see the ones on Skid Row are kind of congregated together in a drug house or whatever. Likes like. It just simply does. A smoker will typically seek out another smoker to be in their relationship with, in their romantic relationship with anyway, because it's pretty challenging to have one with it and one without. And so for me, it gave me sort of a license to drink how I wanted to. And it gave him the same license in reverse. And because it sort of normalized it for us, it just kept insidiously getting to be more frequent. We went from just in the evenings to, okay, we'll do evenings and Saturdays during the days, because we lived on the lake and people would come over and go boating, and whatever we could use for an excuse to drink, we'd do it. And then pretty soon it was as soon as we walked in the door at night, and it was all weekend long. And it's over time that just kind of became this gradual march to death by alcohol. And I just didn't see it, and I certainly didn't want to see it,
Hmm.
because as the book shows later on, that marriage fell apart, which will happen if there are three entities within a union.
Hmm.
It just doesn't work very well. Princess Diana used to say that about Prince Charles and her marriage, that there were three of us in this marriage because of his involvement continuously with Camilla. And I feel like that was the case with our marriage. There were three of us from the get-go. And really the God in our relationship was booze. And
Wow.
that's just not a very solid foundation to base your relationship on.
Absolutely not. I mean, what a dangerous mix of different elements that could lead to, such an explosive state, which it kind of did, moving along in the story. But, I just want to pause here for a second and, see if we can give the crowd different ways, to recognize this. I mean, maybe there is someone out there listening to this and perhaps they're in a relationship where this is going on, and, I think what you said rings so true that, you weren't just in a relationship with Jim, you were also in a relationship with alcohol. And it was like, you guys had this love triangle with, drinking together and each other. And, I'm just wondering, is there anything in your mind that maybe if you could go back and talk to your younger self, that you would tell yourself, like, this is what you need to watch out for?
Oh, absolutely. I the first thing there is, if you're in a relationship or contemplating getting into a relationship, and one of the main reasons is that you feel relief that you won't have to hide something that you otherwise do. I mean, that's a giant red flag right there. But
Right.
for me, and anyone I think who's already abusing substances, you also feel pretty crappy about yourself. You feel pretty lonely. And so it's very easy to glom on and settle for something that isn't necessarily right. And I ignored so many red flags. Jim was actually married to someone else when I met him in Iowa City, and we proceeded to become friends and then more than friends, and he ultimately divorced her and married me. Him being married should have been a giant red flag, right?
Yeah.
um, and him having tendencies even early in our relationship to become the angry drunk, the explosive drunk, the punch holes in doors drunk. I should have, no way. But I married him, and even on our honeymoon, we were drinking the whole time. Of course, many people do on their honeymoons, but for us, we use it as a reason that we should be hammered every single day for the 2 weeks that we were there. And the very first night, we drank way too much, and we ordered room service late at night. And I passed out before the room service showed up. And he was so furious, fueled by alcohol fury.
Oh no.
This wasn't how he really was, but that he ended up waking me up by throwing all of the food and everything, the bottles, everything all around the room. So I took a blanket and pillow and barricaded myself in the bathroom on the first night of my honeymoon. But instead of eating crow, tucking my tail between my legs, telling my folks that, you just spent 12 grand for nothing, I want out, which is what I should have done. I didn't want to embarrass myself. I didn't want them to know that I had made a bad choice, even though they already knew it. And I mean, we just kept doing our thing and kept covering it and kept plodding along. And if it sounds like Jim is a bad man, he is not. He's funny and he's charismatic. He's scary smart. He can speak, and he's a professor, and he's such a great teacher, and he's so talented in a lot of things. So I guess I don't regret that I know him and that I knew him. What I regret is us not getting ourselves together before we contemplated actually moving forward any further in our relationship. Because had we quit drinking, either we would have decided we didn't have that much in common, or I think our relationship would have been much better in the long run. We have 2 beautiful kids together, and now Jim has just about to celebrate 2 years of sobriety, which is fantastic. And so, it has really come full circle, and we're able to co-parent the kids. And I gave him his 1-year chip. I've invited him to my meetings. Talk about what sobriety can bring. If you're out there wondering if you'll be better or worse if you get sober, it might take some time to figure out what your new normal is. But it's so possible, and anything can happen. Jim and I are friends. We practically tried to kill each other when we were getting divorced, and now we are friends because we are both sober.
Yeah, I mean, wow, it's such a powerful thing to hear about, because I think most of the time we don't realize, like, when we are subjectively in a situation that is in overall negative for us, we don't immediately recognize that it is that, or if we do, we don't want to acknowledge that, we don't want to admit it to ourselves. And so adding alcohol to that, I think, is a very dangerous mix of, a very in an already toxic sort of situation. Karla, I want to talk about someone mentioned this in the chat, and I want to talk about the neurochemistry of this. I think when you're in love, your neurochemistry is already sort of going, in all directions. But when you add alcohol to this, what is alcohol doing to the brain when we're drinking, kind of in this way?
Right. Well, exactly. In most simple terms, when you drink or use any kind of substance, certain neurotransmitters in your brain are fired up. So everyone's heard about dopamine and serotonin, and there's also GABA and glutamine and all these different pathways and different neurotransmitters that help to, they're messengers. So they send one message in to another neurotransmitter in the brain. Dopamine helps you with your mood, and it helps with learning, and it helps with movement and pleasure. And serotonin, it increases people's mood, increases their appetite, helps with sleep, all those things. And when you're in love, you're getting some natural surges of those hormones, or chemicals, I should say. When you're drinking, you're also releasing massive amounts of dopamine and serotonin. And then, of course, there's the inevitable, when it starts to wear off, you have this awful crash,
Hmm.
where either you have to get through some time without your drink, or you just say forget it and go ahead and start drinking, and decrease your standard a little bit more. Okay, I was going to start drinking only at 5. Now I'm going to start at 4:55 because I just can't take it anymore. And you
Mhm.
kind of change your own rules based on that. So basically, when you get a relationship, let's say that's the fire. So Jim and I were the fire, and alcohol is obviously the fuel. When you
Right.
put that on, you'll get that surge of flame at the beginning that is just so addictive and so amazing. And oh my God, you want more. And then when you crash, it's just like, and there's not even embers anymore. Fire just goes out. It's done. It's dead. It's awful. So the highs and lows in a relationship like that are addictive in themselves. But when you add alcohol to it, the swings are even greater. And it's just nearly impossible to find a time in a relationship like that to actually have coherent, logical conversations or to make decisions wisely. It's just sort of crashing through life, hoping that there isn't an explosion at some point. But inevitably, there usually is, unless you can get a hold on it.
Wow. I mean, yeah, it seems like just a series of near escapes, and you're avoiding sort of inevitable tragedy. And I mean, wow, it's amazing to hear about this from a perspective like yours. In February of 2012, there was an event in your life that, for most people, it's going to be hard to deal with an event like this. What happened in your life in February 2012, and how did the drinking aspect of things come into play with what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll apologize up front if I get a little choked up with this one. It's a tough one for me. My cousin, she was 4 years older than me, so at the time she was 43. I had been in her wedding. We grew up together. She owned a bar and struggled with her own alcohol use, although I'm not sure to what extent, because she had sort of begun to isolate away from the family and had had a failed marriage and just some things I think she was possibly embarrassed about. Or anyway, she just wasn't around much anymore, which is something that I'll always regret, having not taken the time to reach out to her a little bit more than I did.
Hmm.
Not sure if she would have taken the calls anyway, but she shot herself in the head in her bathtub,
Oh
fully
God.
clothed with the curtains shut and everything, because she didn't want to make a mess. Left a note, just basically saying she knew she wasn't living the lifestyle that she should be, and sorry that she let everyone down, that type of thing. Um, and it
Okay.
was devastating. I mean, when I saw my aunt draped over her casket when they were trying to lower her into the ground, that's just, it should never happen where parents have to bury their child. And when it was a self-inflicted gunshot wound, you just had to know what pain was involved there. And I did really work hard to help my aunt through it, because they were doing a lot of what everyone does when there's a suicide. What if I did? Why didn't I? You should have. Blame and guilt and shame and just all of these horrible emotions that come into play. And it was just awful. And I could see, I knew that there was a lot to do with alcohol with her. And so you'd think, she got so depressed because of her alcoholism that she resorted to suicide. And that could be my fate if I don't get a hold of this. But at that time, I was already kind of in survival mode. At that point, I was within a year of going to my first treatment myself. And so for me, it actually just increased my drinking, because I needed to mask that pain and that loss and that sadness and that fear that all comes with something like that. I just wanted it to go away. But the problem is if you don't deal with grief, you know the stages of grief: denial and anger and acceptance, finally. If you don't deal with those, and in my case just numbed it, then every day I'd wake up and I'd have to relive the pain, because I had numbed it enough to forget the day before, but it was still there the next day. And I think it was much more intense each day because I hadn't started even to deal with actually grieving. It's impossible to fully accept or grieve or understand anything if you're drunk. It just doesn't work. It's just impossible.
Yeah. I mean, wow. First of all, my condolences. I mean, what a story. And as you said, it should have scared you straight. It should have woke you up in a way, and it didn't, and why? I mean, why do you think, obviously the drinking is directly related to this, and perhaps, the level of the pain, the intensity of the pain, you wanted to mask this as much as you could. And so
absolutely,
you turned to, alcohol to do this.
Right. And alcohol, going back just a little bit to, again, the neurobiology, it rewards us in two ways. There's the positive reinforcement of drinking is what you would think, relaxed or forget the pain or whatever. But at that stage in my life, I was already definitely alcoholic. And so there's also negative reinforcement. And what that means is if I don't drink, I'll feel terrible. But if I drink, I'll feel not so bad. And so that if you don't drink, that's going to be negative. So that is a reinforcement to drink more. And so when there's a physical dependence that has started, and it had definitely started with me by that point,
Karla,
it's twofold.
I'm so sorry to bump you there. There's just some clipping happening with Skype, and I just want to restart the call really quick. Guys, just hang tight for me really fast. All right, guys, sorry about that. We are back. Karla, are you there, Karla?
I am.
Okay, let's see if that fixes it. Hopefully it does. Okay, so we were talking about the neurochemistry of the effect of this on your brain, and we were talking about the death of your cousin and she took her life in the hardest way. I mean, it was a suicide. And and the last thing I said was that this should have been a wake up call for you, but it wasn't. And then you start to go into the neurochemistry of this, why it didn't happen that way for you.
Yeah. Well, for those of you who already heard this, I'm sorry, but there's just a couple of ways that alcohol provides reward, and if a person like me was already into a physical dependence, that's pretty intense. And the first is that, of course, alcohol does what we'd expect it to. The reason that many people drink is to relax, is to forget. And for me, at that point, it was to numb the pain of having lost her in such a horrific way. But by that point, there's also the negative reinforcement. And what that means is that if I don't drink, I'll feel like crap. And so you know that I'm going to get this crappy feeling to go away, or I'm going to ward it off if I just drink. And I'm also going to have the benefit of being able to forget this pain. But then, like I mentioned earlier, the problem is that when you wake up the next morning, here we go again. The pain is still there.
Right. I mean, you have to deal with this at some point, or it's going to haunt you until you do. It's going to haunt you until you eventually do that. I want to move forward a little bit in the story, and you started drinking at work, right? And it got worse and worse. What brought you to the point where you felt like you needed to drink at work? How did you get away with it? Because, I mean, wasn't there someone around that would have seen you working and drinking and noticed that you were doing that? Tell us about that, please.
Yeah. Well, I'm a physician assistant, and at the time I was working family practice. I had done that for 17 years. And so in family practice, I wasn't working with a team of surgeons and scrub techs and the whole deal. It was just me. And I had a nurse, but the nurse and I, as most people will know, when you go to see the doctor, you don't see the nurse and the doc at the same time. The nurse checks you in and does all that stuff, and then you kind of are two ships passing. So my nurse and I would just sort of dance around each other. So that wasn't an issue. I had an office mate, but she and I only overlapped one day per week. So I had my personal office to myself most of the time as well. But how it got started, for a long time, it had been where I'd got home from work and I never even took my coat off or my shoes off, and I went straight to the liquor cabinet. And I wouldn't even bother with that first pull with a glass, just right out of the bottle. And then I could barely wait till I got home, so I started keeping a traveler or a flask in my car. My house was 2 miles from my work, but I did not think I could make it from work to home after a stressful day without having that. So I would start drinking in the car on the way home. And right, I mean, 2 miles, can't make it 2 miles. You usually can wait 2 miles if you got to pee. I mean, this was crazy, right?
Right.
But that's the way it was. And as you can imagine, the story going and the ball rolling, pretty soon at home at night wasn't enough. And I started going home for, quote, lunch. And at that point, I would take a few slugs of vodka. I wouldn't eat anything, but I'd take a few slugs of vodka to get myself a little bit less shaky, kind of ward off the nausea and the sweats that I'd been feeling. And that would give me the boost to get through the afternoon. And then I'd start drinking as soon as I hit the car and as soon as I was at home until I passed out, whether that was in my bed or on the floor or who knows. It was always drink to pass out. That was always the purpose. But even that was not enough after a while. And I think we addicts and alcoholics frequently make little rules for ourselves. Like, okay, I'm only going to drink on the weekends. Okay, I'm only going to drink at the bar. Okay, I'm only going to drink at home. Okay, I'm only going to drink beer and not anything hard. And it tends to be that when we make these little rules with ourselves, if we're truly an alcoholic, we blow right through them. You just can't. It just gets worse. It's a progressive and chronic primary brain disease. It doesn't get better if you're continuing to use a substance. And so my lunchtime trysts were not enough. And I just decided, you know what? Nobody has picked up on this. I have not had a single patient complaint. I have had nobody in the office ask me anything. I'm getting by with it. I'm getting away with it. So I started filling my water bottle with vodka. And that way, in between each patient, I could go back to my office and take some sips and do a note or write some orders or whatever I needed to do, and then go back and see the next patient. And so then I wasn't in this giant rush to get out of work anymore because I was there. I was able to have my drink and do my work at the same time, which is crazy. And took way more effort on my part than it should have. I could run circles around myself 6 years sober now, comparatively, as far as my energy levels, but still got it done. Uphill battle, but.
Sorry, I didn't mean to bump you there. Why do you think we have this persistence to go back to these things that are essentially bad for us? We know this is bad for us, but we continue to go back into it and do it over and over.
Well, it kind of depends on what exact thing you're talking about, but with substances, it goes back to the brain, and we know so little about about the brain, but we do some of these neurotransmitters and some of these pathways, and it truly is when your brain is got the compulsion and your body is physically addicted to whatever it is. It's really hard to kick that. And that's why I think we keep coming back to it, because the effort required to either avoid it or stay away from it or go cold turkey or whatever is worse and harder and more challenging than just staying with the status quo. And again, it's that adapting that you referred to earlier when we were talking about my marriage, and in that when you're in it, you don't necessarily realize how bad it is. You've probably heard the story, the boiling frog thing, but it goes that, if you put out a little dish of cold water for your pet frog, she'll frolic and she'll play in it and she'll jump around and she loves it because frogs love water. Well, tomorrow you make it a little warmer. She still frolics. She still messes around a little bit in the water, but you can tell it's not quite as enjoyable, but she still gets used to it because she wants to swim and she wants to drink. Keep fast forwarding every day, heating the water, and that frog will jump into that boiling water and boil herself because she has adapted. And that's true. It's a real deal. But it's a great representation, although somewhat cryptic, I guess, of what we do. It's we're used to it. And even though it's a completely messed up normal, it is still our normal, and it still feels normal, and it still feels like it's easier than the alternative, because with the alternative, there's also a lot of unknowns, which creates giant amount of fear. Who am I going to be without the drink? Will I have any fun without the drink? Am I going to have to lose all my friends if I quit drinking? Is my marriage going to fail if I drink and he doesn't, or vice versa?
Right.
And what if I go get treatment and I have to tell them at work why I'm gone for 12 weeks? Or what if, will they take me back? Or I won't be able to pay my bills for 3 months. The excuses for not doing something about it are miles long.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. And I mean, you nailed it. I mean, you enter this state of, substance dependence where you feel like you need that to behave a certain way. And, I think with alcohol specifically, they're, just neurochemically, it's psychologically as bad as it is physically. And I mean, that's what's the most scary about the availability of it, being able to go down the street and acquire this stuff. Moving along here, you hit a point where, you eventually got to detox. Your first trip to detox. And I mean, your father took you to detox, right?
Yes, he did.
So Okay, so I mean, there's a few things here. You felt like it was a jail. Why do you feel like you had that reaction? I find that when I read stories about this, that people don't respond to their first treatment well. It seems like traditional detox seems ineffective in relationship to
Hmm.
curbing these types of addictions. So what was your experience like in this center? You call it a prison. How did it work?
Yeah, well, oh gosh, it's yucky for me to even think about it. But first of all, and we can get into this much more as the call progresses, but detox is not a solution. It is not fixing. It is very different than rehab or a program that whatever program you might decide to do, to whatever it is. Detox is getting you stopped. That's it. But you alluded to that it's both a psychological compulsion and a physical one. Well, detox gets you out of the scary withdrawal of the physical addiction, but it does absolutely nothing to curb that psychological addiction. That needs
Mm-hmm.
months, weeks, years of work, at
Mm-hmm.
least in my experience. But yeah, so I went to detox and I was going on my own accord. It wasn't that I didn't think I needed it. But once you get in there and say, okay, I need detox, and then I was very honest with the counselors and everyone because I thought, okay, here I go. I'm going to get the help. And it was really shocking what it felt like to have a bunch of my rights taken away. And they take away your rights as a new detox or any detox participant because your risk of suicide, your risk of eloping, your risk of doing something stupid is really high when you're in a withdrawal period,
Mm-hmm.
as is your risk of, especially if you're addicted to alcohol or benzos, the actual withdrawal part can be fatal if not medically managed because
Mm-hmm.
of the risk of seizures. But yeah, so I went in and I told him what I needed and told him my whole truth and nothing but the truth. And so then what happens is you get stripped and strip searched and they take all of your belongings. I couldn't have makeup because it was in a glass bottle, and I couldn't have a compact because it had a mirror that could be sharp. We didn't have mirrors over our sinks or anywhere. The bathroom doors were kind of these weird kitty corner with cutout on the top and the bottom so that you could never lock yourself in there or anything. The water was all run on those little ones you have to push a button to get like 10-second spray. They were all like that, so you couldn't drown yourself. There were no plastic bags allowed. The garbage cans and things were lined with paper sacks. There was just all of these things. Door handles are real weird because then you can't tie something to it. They cut out the strings of my sweatshirts and my sweatpants and everything, and I couldn't have any shoes. And they take away your phone, take away your purse, and take away everything. And I felt like that was overkill. I felt like I should just get in there. They'd give me some Valium. I'd get over it, and I could play on my phone while I got through it. Nope, wasn't like that at all.
Wow. I mean, it seems like the system is almost designed to kind of push people away from wanting to go into processes like like recovery. I want to know what for you was the bottom. Something common that we hear is you'll recognize this when you hit your bottom. Was there a bottom for you?
Yes, there was, but it was a low bottom. For me personally, I had to lose my um, relationship. I had to lose my job and then my medical license and then my national board certification and my drug enforcement agency licensure, none of which are easy to obtain and certainly not easy to get back if you've lost them. I had to go on state medical. I and then ultimately I lost the ability to even see my children because I drank through a paid parenting supervising time visit. And so I lost them. And so the only person who was still taking my phone calls was my mom, and even she was pretty wary because I had manipulated and lied and worn her out, caused a rift between her and my dad, and them and my sister, and it was just a mess. And I had to I had to lose all of that before I realized, okay, now what am I going to do about this? And that is where I got to on one February morning, where I had already been in detox twice and rehab twice in that 10-month period of time. And I had continued to drink through it, and I had continued to just lose more and more. And there I was in my walk-in closet. I had a mansion really at the time, 6,000 square feet. And there I was in my closet. You know, they joke about closet drinkers. That was me. I really, really was a closet drinker
Wow.
because I had begun to hide it in there for so long. And so there I was, me and every pill in the house that I had left over from years and years of, you know, how you keep leftover prescriptions. And I had all that and my laptop and my phone and my vodka, and I was in my closet and I was researching online, how do you kill yourself with pills? What
Oh,
concoction
no.
of what I had would do it? Because I was done. I knew that it was over. And of all things, one of those annoying pop-ups that I usually hate and ignore came up on my computer screen. Um, I'm sorry, this is hard. And it said, do you need help? And for some reason, I called the number.
Wow.
And the guy on the other line, on the other end, his name was Phil. I never knew his last name. I wish I did. Phil, if you're out there, I owe you my life. And here he's a rehab broker. He's just trying to find placement for people at rehabs and fill rehabs and get a commission, right? But he spent 2 hours on the phone with me, really turned into a suicide mission, suicide prevention
Right.
mission. And before the phone call was out, he had got me hooked up with a rehab in Florida that would accept the crappy insurance I had at the time, a plane ticket, a cab ride coming, and he kept on the phone with me until all of this was in place. I think partially so I wouldn't back out, but partially I think I scared him. And he wanted to stay on there with me until he knew I was safe. It's pretty remarkable, good Samaritan duty there. I wonder if he quit the job the next day. I don't know. But
An angel. It sounds like you had your own angel that day, and I mean, it's like the pop up that saved your life, basically.
oh, for sure. I smile every time I see pop-ups now because you just never know.
Oh my God! Wow. You know, Karla, we're running out of time here quickly, but I want to get into the 12 steps. There's a bunch of stuff that I didn't cover here. What is your regard to the 12 steps? Because I know that you connected with that and you write about this. And so, what is your experience with this and the experience of other alcoholics? I mean, do you feel like the 12 steps work? Did they work for you?
They absolutely 100% worked and work for me. It's not something that, much to my chagrin as a list writer and checker offer of boxes, it's not something that you do the 12 steps and then you're done and you graduate and you get your little card to put in your wallet and you're good to go. That's not at all the case. It's a lifelong thing. But that is not to say that a 12-step program is the only way that people get their drinking under control. There's smart recovery, there's harms reduction, there's medication-assisted treatments, there's a plethora of other ways. And I honestly am of the school of thought that I do not care how you get sober. If just do whatever you can to get there. But for me, the 12 steps really resonated, probably again because I am a list keeper and a box checker, and I like that kind of structure. It's really good for me, and I had lost a great deal of structure during my alcoholism, as all substance abusers do. Structure becomes a thing of the past, but it was really, really good for me. The first step is the most important one and the only one that you need to do perfectly, and basically that's admitting I got a major problem here, and it's wrecking my life, and that's it. With any addiction. If you can fill in the blank there with, I'm eating too much and it's ruining my life. I'm gambling too much. I'm watching porn too much. Whatever it is, you just fill in the blank. And so any of these 12-step programs that you attend kind of use the same premise. So I'm not ascribing to a specific program by any means,
Hmm.
nor should I if I were, because I think that that's not helpful to say there's only one way. I think that everybody's recovery is a little bit different. But for me, getting step one right was really important. And by doing that, my counselor had me write out an exhaustive list of what happens to me when I
Yes.
drink. And on the flip side, he also had me write a letter, like a longing goodbye letter. What is it you love about alcohol? What is it that you're going to miss about alcohol? And I really wrote it as if I was writing to a lover, because honestly, at the end, that was my lover. It was my best friend, my lover, my partner. Had slept in my bed with me. It was really all I had left. So step one was incredibly important. Step four is when they typically ask you to search through your past. What kind of things did you do that hurt people? What kind of things were done to you that hurt you? What kind of resentments do you hold? What kind of sexual indiscretions have you been involved with in your life? And basically writing it all down. And for me, a person who'd always thought that, oh, I'm a really good person, I'm a really nice person,
Hmm.
in that 106 pages that I wrote of my fourth step, I really couldn't find a whole lot of evidence to support that I was a good person. Not much at all. And it was really helpful for me to look at all that, because I was like, good God, I do not want a sequel to this. I don't
Right.
want to have to write this all out again in another 20 years that, oh, look at all the crap I've done now. So that was really helpful. But the letter was also helpful to me because I hadn't realized how much I loved it.
Hmm.
And I had to grieve it. Even though it was killing me, I had to grieve that loss.
Yeah, I actually bookmarked the list and the letter just because it's so cringy, to be honest. It just reading it,
I
it
know.
made me feel like, oh my God, wow, I'm never drinking again. And so, I just moving along here. I think this is important. I think the spirituality part of this is crucial. And how did that take place for you? How did that come into play for you?
That's a great question. And it was pretty easy for me personally, because I had been raised Lutheran Christian, and I had a God that I believed in, and I was pretty solid in my faith. So much so that I had really distanced myself from anything God, anything church. I had even stopped praying unless it was a really particularly bad bender and I was praying to die, because I didn't feel like I was worthy. I didn't feel like God would want me. I was a piece of crap, and I knew it. He knew it. Everyone knew it. And so I had really veered away from that. But the 12-step program, step two and step three, do get into spirituality. And this actually hangs up a lot of people. It's like, I'm not joining a 12-step program. I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist. I'm agnostic. There's no way I'm getting spiritual. And that's okay. You still can totally do the program, even a 12-step program, if that's not your thing.
Hmm.
What spirituality is getting to is that connectedness, that being whole in body and mind. And most importantly, realizing that we are but a speck, each one of us in this great universe,
Sure.
and that we don't have control over very much, and that we don't have control over this either, and we need some help. And that is so hard, especially for professionals, I think, with alcoholism, to ask for help, because we've been independent and we've been well educated and we've cared for ourselves and others for as long as we can remember. And now all of a sudden we're supposed to be asking for help. We're supposed to be reaching out to
Hmm.
others when we have a craving to drink. We're supposed to be sharing that 106-page fourth step with another human being. Are you kidding me?
Right.
But that all ties into the spiritual component. I've got a lot of friends in my healthcare recovery meeting who they're just that group is their higher power. They know that if they need help, if they need to run something by people, bring it to the group, and we're all in their corner. And if anyone has a crisis, there'd be half a dozen people at least, showing up to help them. And that's a pretty spiritual experience in itself, feeling
Hmm.
that sense of belonging that a lot of times many of us started drinking to try to belong or to try to feel better about ourselves socially. And so to find that type of connection with people, a real, genuine, authentic connection that doesn't have anything to do with alcohol, that's new for a lot of us. And it's just incredible. I cannot say enough for the fellowship of any type of support group, because nobody's going to be able to help a person the same way that someone can who's
Hmm.
been there, who's done it and gotten through it is more important. You know, we share these stories. I go to treatment centers and the jail and meet with these women who are kind of brand new, and gosh, that's so important for me to look back and see, oh yeah, that's where I don't want to be again. I remember that. I remember that. But then on the flip side, they can hopefully look at me and my story and what I was able to get through and how I'm able to do good now, and find that inspirational, that even if someone as bottom barrel as me made it, that they can too. And your listeners out there, I know it can seem awful, and you've got an intelligent base that listens to you, and that actually is a detriment, because we tend to think, this 12-step thing, that's way too simple,
Hmm.
or we can outsmart it. We got master's degrees, PhDs, we're whatever,
Right.
and we should be able to be smarter than this. But it has nothing to do with brain power. It's not that at all. So making those little deals with yourself, or trying to figure out how you can use parts of what's recommended to you in rehab and not other parts, that's a recipe for disaster. I know this because I did it, I lived it, and I know it.
Yeah, I think the most powerful aspect of this book was that I felt like I was with you through the journey of it, and as I was reading it, I felt like I was connected to your struggle with it. And I think the first time that I felt like, as a reader reading it, I felt, the first time that you kind of there was a light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, was the moment where you sort of recognized that you are in fact blessed, that you started to have gratitude for your life and who you are. And I think that was the first time, unless I'm mistaken, that there was this positive acknowledgement from you, about yourself. And I think that that's so important.
Yes. And I think that removing the substance and starting to get a hold of what it had done to me, how it had hurt me, and realizing that, again, that step one work, just admitting, holy cow, this has caused this, and then doing something about it, and feeling like, as I was learning from these people who had a couple years or 8 years or however many years of sobriety, and looking at them and being like, oh, ooh, I think I can do this. I think I want what she has or he has, and they're not drinking. And that gave me inspiration. And my sponsor and my counselors and anyone in the program continually stress gratitude. And so at first, my gratitude list was fairly small. I had my health back. I had plenty to eat. I was warm. Those basics. So already out of the gate, fresh in rehab, I was better off than half of the world's population. And so it was really important for me to look at it that way. And then as time passed, I start adding to that gratitude list, and little things that I had taken for granted before, I got to add back on that list. I tell you, that's a pretty cool thing when amazing relationship with your kids gets to be added back to a list that it had previously disappeared from.
Hmm.
That's what this is all about, is regaining some things, and getting a life that's authentic, genuine, real, and meaningful, that I never imagined was possible. So am I a grateful recovering alcoholic? Absolutely. When people used to say that in my first meetings, I would be so upset. Like, seriously, grateful recovering alcoholic? There is nothing to be grateful about here. This sucks. I don't want it. I don't want to be it. I don't want to be in this group. But eventually, over time, you start to see that, oh, wait a minute. I've gotten some pretty cool things happen because of my alcoholism.
Hmm.
Not in spite of, but because of. And I am indeed grateful every single day that I get to wake up and get to be sober and get to do another day. I'm not cured. I'll never be cured. And every day is but a reprieve from the addiction. And if I were to pick up today, I'd be worse off than I was the last time I drank in that airport toilet stall back before I got sober. Because it progresses. Even if you're not actively drinking, it gets worse. It's just waiting for you. Um, and a lot of us, including myself, had to test out that theory. There's no way this disease gets worse. If I've been away from booze for 3 months, it should be much easier for me to control it now, right? Not at all. Those neurotransmitters start doing the exact same thing they were doing before, and it's you need more. You need it more often. It's confounding.
I mean, I think another reason that this story is so resounding is that it's just real. It's just raw and real, and that's the way life is. It's not pretty. It's actually quite ugly, and that's exactly how life is. And but I want to give you a chance to address the audience, and if anyone's out there and they're hearing this message, and here you are in every way a success story. You're still alive, and you have this opportunity to write about this experience that you've in a way you've conquered. You didn't let it conquer you. You conquered it. And here you are on this show writing a book about it. What about the people that are alone out there and they're struggling? What can you say to them? How can we reach them?
Yeah, well, it's so hard because often when you're in the throes of the addiction, you don't want to be reached, and usually there's very little that anyone else out there can say to make someone want to get better or to fix their problem for them or to push them into rehab. I know for me, I couldn't truly get better until it was my idea. Um, but I would encourage particularly you chronic relapsers out there who think you're a lost cause. You've been in 30 treatment centers and you just can't get it. Keep trying. I've seen it. I've seen people go through that many rehabs and detoxes and centers, and finally something happens and they get it. But that's because they kept trying and they didn't give up and let it kill them. Because that is what's going to happen. You end up, if you're a chronic, serious alcoholic, it just leads to jails, institutions, and death. It's a very grim prospect. That starts from a few sips of alcohol. So it's very dangerous, and I would implore you to keep trying, to read everything you can get, to join some online support groups, to find websites and blogs where you connect with somebody. Go on Twitter. There's Recovery Posse. There's all these different groups on Twitter where you don't have to even tell who you really are, but you can get some major support that way. And that can help you feel not so alone, but yet in somewhat of a safe, anonymous way. Get out there. Somebody has gone through what you're going through, and they can be able to tell you their story, how they got there, and how they got better. It's all about experience, strength, and hope in this program. It's why it works that, no matter what your program is, the people who've been in it for a while help the newcomers. And that's the way it should be in life, don't you think?
For sure. I mean, Karla, I'm so glad that you are here still with us today and that you've written this story and done this. And as I said, it's such a resounding, just realness to this. Where can people go to pick up this book? Is there a website that they can go to find this book?
Yep, absolutely. Of course, you can get it on Amazon. And Goodreads and Barnes & Noble, Target, any place books are sold. As far as reaching me, which I invite and love, you can reach me at fromthebrink at yahoo.com. That's my personal email. And also, I have a website of the same title, fromthebrink.org. And there you'll find some blog posts and some connections and a link to the book there too. But hopefully, with those types of, not just my links, with all of the different supports available out there, your listeners have a lot to choose from, and you can do it, guys. You really can.
Wow, guys. I mean, what a story. And Karla, I just thank you so much for being here. Guys, we're going to get out of here. The book is called From the Brink of the Drink. Highly recommend this read. My guest, Karla Juvonen. Hopefully I'll get that eventually. But you guys can find this book, From the Brink of the Drink, online, as Karla said. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. We will be back next week with another episode. Have a good night.